Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'll be swapping the cam belt in this Type 940 Giulietta QV. So despite the reputation of Italian vehicles being difficult to work on, this is actually quite straightforward. So we've got our torque angle gauge here, our valve cover gasket, red coolant, degreaser, water pump, cam belt, pulleys, camshaft locking tools, crankshaft locking tools, accessory belt. In addition to those consumables, you will need a full metric socket kit, a soft blow hammer, a dedicated 15mm wrench, a 30mm socket, an extension bar, needle nose pliers, a torque wrench, Torx bits, hex bits, and a breaker bar. So this should be most of what you need to replace your cam belt. It should be a pretty straightforward job, rather easy, so let's crack to it. So the first thing we'll do is remove the front right wheel. Once we've done that, we can remove the lower splash tray and remove the front right wheel arch. Now this arch is important because it gives you access to things such as the headlights, the oil filter, the air filter, the accessory belt, and the entire front of the engine. With that out of the way, I'll use a piece of wood to support the engine while I remove the right engine mount, and this should give us access to the cam and crank shafts. So the front right wheel is off, the wheel arch is out, the lower guard is out, the upper engine cover is out, the lower splash guard is out, and I've just finished removing the cam gear cover. Now this only required 4 5mm bolts, which you can remove with an Allen key set. However, I was having difficulty with the last bolt, only to find that the cover itself was broken. You can see the bolts still in there. On the back, this should be stuck to the engine. And that's the rest of that assembly. But I also wanted to note that on the sticker itself, someone has pointed out the last time the cam belt had been replaced, which was in February 2017 at 100,000 kilometers. This car is now done about 190,000 kilometers, so it's about 30,000 Ks or 50% over the recommended belt change. The car is still running fine and the belt actually looks really good. So it is possible that it's been changed in that time, but I don't want to risk it, especially being an Alfa Romeo. The auxiliary belt tensioner was seized, so I had to remove it. However, normally you'd just fit a spanner over the end and rotate it clockwise until the belt tension is loose enough to remove the auxiliary belt. So more annoying than actually swapping the belt itself is all the peripherals you need to remove. So we've got a vacuum pump over here, which is vital to remove to get to the back of the camshafts where the locking tools will go. But in the way is this intake pipe. Now I've decided just to remove that completely. It's just 2 5mm bolts, one at the top, one underneath, and then we've got this Bosch clip here. At the bottom you've got one of those annoying Alfa clips. Now this Bosch clip, it's got a black part and a yellow part. All you need to do is push the yellow part out, pull it out as far as it will go, and then you can press down on the black clip and wiggle it out. There you go. Now I just need to undo the annoying Alfa clip at the bottom and we can get this air pipe out. The Alfa hose clamp was too difficult to remove, so I opted just to push the pipe out of the way and get started on the vacuum pump removal. Alright, so we're at the back of the engine now. You can see that the vacuum pump has been removed. Over here there's this black flange, which is where the locking tool goes on the exhaust side. On the intake side there is a blanking plate with 3 bolts, which I'm yet to remove. And I'm going to install the locking tools and use those to hold the crankshaft in place while I remove those bolts to get the harmonic balancer off and get to the actual crankshaft pulley. And now it's time to install the cam shaft locking tool. So over here on the left you've got this bolt here. It should be silver like these 4 Here's the tool that came with the locking kit. This just goes into this threaded hole, just tighten it all the way down to the end. You can just do a hand tight. And then we've got the locking tool itself. You can tell the underside because it's got this cutout for the crankshaft surround. There's also a little hole here which lines up with a dimple. As I found out, these marks mean that whoever last replaced the Cambelt didn't actually use locking tools, they just set it to whatever they thought was top dead center. And then all you need to do is insert one of the original harmonic balancer screws. I'll tighten that up later. And the nut and washer onto this end of the crank tool. The backing plate that the engine mounts mount onto uses 3 15mm bolts just under the top, one 13mm bolt near the middle, and this 13mm bolt at the very bottom. But you need to remove the pulley tensioners before you can access the lower bolt. The next step is to detension the belt and take the belt off and replace it. Now I've removed the end caps from the cam gears. Inside you've got these Torx bolts that need to be loosened to loosen the cams. So in the Alfa Romeo world, it is fairly well known that there are two types of water pumps. This is an OEM style with plastic impeller blades. This is an aftermarket style which was in the car, which has steel blades. And it's also worth noting that on the Alfa Romeo, the water pump is more likely to fail than the Cambelt is to snap. Now we're just going to smear the gasket with some gasket goo and then chuck this into the car real quick. Next we will install the Cambelt pulley tensioner. All we have to do is make sure it's lined up with the guide. With all pulleys in place, we will install the new Cambelt. Next we will set the new tensioner to maximum. The easiest way to do this is to thread a bolt into the hole below the tensioner and leverage a screwdriver off the tab on the tensioner. While doing this, we will push the pointer as high as it will go and tighten the tensioner bolt. With all the locking tools in place, we will torque down the cam gears. We will do this in two stages, first at 60 Newton meters and then at a further 25 degrees with a torque angle gauge. A trick I used was to set the torque wrench to maximum and use it with the angle gauge as it works better than a breaker bar. Next, rotate the crankshaft 2 full revolutions clockwise to make sure that the belt is correctly tensioned, and then loosen the tensioner so the pointer is now above the hole. Tighten the bolt on the tensioner and give the crankshaft 2 more revolutions clockwise. Once you're confident that the camshafts are pointing at the right direction and the pointer on the tensioner is still above the hole, you can continue to torque down all the bolts around the engine and reassemble the peripherals around the engine. And that is how you replace a 1750 TBI Cambelt. All that's left to do is idle the engine for a little while until the temps get up and bleed the coolant system.